This is Roni Dover from Digma. Today we're looking into how Roni uses content creation to build community, to build thought leadership as a founder, etc. And we're going to let him take it away. Tell us a bit about what you do, both your company and how it relates to the content that you're putting out.
Thank you. First of all, great to be here and to be talking about it. So Digma got started about 8 months ago, and the sole idea was to change the way that people write code. We saw that there was so much that we could use in the observability space, but developers were not using it. And this is what we were essentially trying to do. And to get there, to get developers to realize that, we understood that we need to first be able to communicate that well and in a way that resonates with them. But it's also kind of a two-way street. We use that to both get the word out, but also to understand how people are receiving it, how they're interpreting what we're saying. So from the start, from the get-go, even for our own personal conviction, creating content was extremely important. So we went through quite a journey to kind of get to the right type of content, to understand what works and what doesn't, and also to get myself, a complete introvert, to kind of be able to write blog posts or speak at conferences and kind of metamorphose a bit to be able to do all of that stuff.
As a complete introvert myself, I totally identify with that sentiment. And I want to dive into that. You know, how do you get yourself comfortable? How did you decide that writing was your medium or speaking at events? Like, how do you actually connect with that?
I think I found out two things. First of all, it's really important to go with your strengths. If you're better as kind of in front of an audience, and speak a lot in front of an audience. If you're better at writing, and I always liked writing, so start using and leveraging that. I think what I found out as well is that what works best with content is humility, is actually kind of losing all of the ego, not kind of announcing your product to the world in a very kind of didactic way. I'm going to teach you how it's done, and this is my kind of, like, not proselytizing your message, but really coming from this perspective where you really don't know. And this, in multiple instances, it made a lot of difference on our journey. I'll give you an example. When I got started, being the introvert that I am, I had zero social media exposure. I didn't even think about posting anything until then online for other people to see. And I was faced with the kind of challenge of, how do I get from zero traction, zero people that know me, to create a wider audience? Some people maybe have the advantage of already being there, already having viewership or people that are following them. I did not have that privilege. And the first thing I did was I took 20 people that I thought that personally I appreciated the most, and not just influencer, but basically people that I thought were kind of an authority in their field, in the technical field, in our case for developers. And I reached out to them, again, being very honest and humble about it, and basically told them, look, I'm a first-time blog writer. This is the blog post that I wrote. I'd be happy to get your thoughts on the idea, on the content, on how I presented it. And I sent it over, and it's something so trivial, I would never think it would work, right? So I sent it to like 20 people. 16 completely ignored me, probably got stuck in their junk mail. 4 wrote me back. And these are very high profile people like, Scott Hanselman, or, people that have a large following, but also I respect their opinion, which is more important. And they were amazing. Some of them gave me kind of, some of them are professional blog post writers. So they could give me style or kind of told me how to structure the blog post or the text better, or even visually what works and what doesn't. Some of them really spoke to the domain and what resonated with them and what didn't. And I gained a lot from that, just in terms of how to write better blog posts and publish it out and so on. But all of them shared the blog post once it came out. And all of them continued to collaborate with me in future projects and blog posts and so on. So the key is really to understand that or for me was that to understand that I was really clawing my way upwards, but I need to do that by being completely honest about that fact, and not kind of, if I were to try to expect that just by releasing this really awesome blog post, everybody would start following it and it would happen automatically by magic, it would not happen that way. And there are a lot of other examples, but I think just coming from that approach, not being assuming about it, being very open and kind of approaching in a very non-aggressive way is really helped us.
I think that's amazing. I think, yeah, this idea that it's very intimidating and everyone else is just out there in some tower and untouchable, and you're just down here, and why would anyone want to listen to you, is a huge fear that any of us who produce content definitely have. It leads me to another, I want to come back to sort of community engagement and distribution, but first, something I don't know if it's a real term, but I call blank page syndrome. Like, if I'm staring at a blank page, it's impossible, and it's getting started is the hardest part. Do you have any tips for other founders or people who want to get started in this to kind of overcome that initial, especially if like content is not necessarily their number one thing?
This is more of a general writing question, but yes, blank page, writer's block happens all the time. I think for me, what helps is to find something that's completely unrelated to what you want to talk about, and then finding a link. For example, I remember this, we're talking about observability, and I remember that I was reading this review of a show that was on TV that was using a lot of this technique of kind of breaking the fourth wall between the actor and the audience. And I'm like, okay, so maybe observability is about breaking the fourth wall between the code and the developer. And immediately kind of that helped me kind of get into this very unique way maybe of conveying the message. And it really helped me along in overcoming that block. But in general, I think there is a very important process that you go through in writing, especially in the early blog post, because essentially you're creating something and you think that something is important to people. Like maybe you don't, maybe it's a product that's very technical and saves, I don't know, margins of profit in a very technical way that shouldn't matter to anybody except the people making money off of it. But maybe it is something that is important, that you care about, and you should be able to speak to it. So overcoming your writer block is also overcoming your own kind of internal crystallization of the idea, so that you'll be able to speak to it and have this kind of organize your own thoughts in a way. So, when you do meetings or talk to VCs or talk to friends, you're always kind of taking fragments and kind of trying to make them enthusiastic about it. But when you write a blog post, all of those fragments need to come together, and it doesn't need to even be about your product. It needs to be about the problem and why it's important. So ultimately, being able to kind of convey your thoughts in a very consistent and passionate manner, and that's also organized and has the internal logic and makes sense to people who hear it, has nothing to do with marketing. It has nothing, even if you don't release that blog post at all, you need to write that blog post because it's essentially your manifesto. It's the reason for you being there. And the more you write, the more things will become obvious to you that you might have taken for granted, because once you write them down, you start being critical about them and start examining them and seeing what makes sense and what doesn't. And it's a really, I think, important thought process for founders, even if they don't mean to use that to get to an audience, community, or whatnot. It's just a good way to work on your idea.
Yeah, for sure. I like the idea that it's also a tool, just internally introspection, get yourself focused, kind of get your message right for yourself. That's excellent. Let's say that you do want to publish, put it out there, etc. How do you approach distribution? Which, I mean, being someone who works in this, it's like the toughest challenge when you're trying to reach a lot of people. From your perspective, as someone who's really just about the sort of sharing the ideas about the problem, very, very like pure. How do you think about distribution? And yeah, let's stop there, and I'll get to community in a second.
The technical answer, or the more kind of pragmatic answer, is that there are various mediums that help you get your message across. I used publications in the blog, in the website Medium, which already have some viewership. So once you kind of talk to the publication editor and you get kind of accepted, then it helps you kind of start off with a better exposure to everything that you write. Then I used a lot of kind of ways to distribute the message across. If it's Reddit, which is kind of no man's land in terms of being both kind of quick on the trigger to kick you off a channel if you post too much, but also kind of accepting all sorts of types of content, and Twitter and other places. I think that there was being, again, not that comfortable sometimes with being too pushy. I would often kind of feel, am I spamming? Am I actually kind of creating too much noise for people? And every time I would think that, I would get this other email from somebody who read the blog post through Reddit when I was completely spamming the channel. Like I was kind of saying, hey, look at this, what do you think? And out of nowhere, and he would say, you know, I read your blog post, I really liked it. Here are my thoughts. And this really charges you up and kind of helps you overcome this kind of feeling that you may be a little bit too markety, or, you know, like maybe too aggressive with the way that you're pushing your message across. So it's always, having said that, it doesn't make sense, or it will never work if you don't understand the rules wherever it is that you're posting, and the practices and the conventions. Like spend 10 minutes in each such kind of channel, if it's a Reddit channel, or, you know, wherever it is that you post, to see what other people are doing and what are the, you know, the rules that they're posting and so on. Because, for example, some places would say, please don't post an open question, you know, start a discussion and present an argument. Some places would say, if you are posting something, then, you know, make sure it's directly related to this or that technology, otherwise don't post it. So it doesn't make sense to just, you know, randomly send things, because people would not take them seriously. If you spend even 10 minutes to understand and show some respect to kind of how people are you know, used to communicating in that specific audience, then it will get you much, much further.
Yeah, I just want to underline that when it comes to that, you know, what a shame it is to do all that work, create these ideas, and lose out on a technicality. Like it kills me when I see people missing it at the end. So very good advice to take those 10 minutes. I agree. Something I see in this type of like developer to developer, you know, communication or content or conversation. I think this type of content and community go hand in hand, because the whole point is that you're reaching out to a specific audience, specific community, sharing ideas. It feels like it should be a two-way conversation. Do you have tips for people who want to get involved in actual communities, but, you know, how do you get started getting in? What does it take? I mean, some founders talk right away about starting communities off the bat, and I always say maybe join a few first and that kind of thing. So what would you tell people?
I think the concept of a community is sometimes misunderstood. Like there are communities that are completely ad hoc, that kind of come together and then fall apart around a specific thread or a topic. There communities that don't really care for people kind of giving them their ideas or blog posts or whatnot, because they're about improving their code because they want to get hired to a tech position. So it's really about kind of what type of audience you want to reach and how you want to engage with them. Building a community is hard. It's something that doesn't happen overnight. And when it is successful, it is always about a common problem. So people forget that it has to be about the fact that people need to have something to gain from joining the community. It's not about kind of an abstract concept or something like that. It's about people that have a common problem or a common set of pains, and this in the dev world creates great communities. I think another thing that really works well is being very much in touch with your target audience in any way possible. So for example, meetups, they're coming back big time, at least here in the US. So attending meetups, coming to meetups, speaking at meetups really helps. You get, again, a lot of traction. People will point you out to what their communities are, and you'll be asked sometimes to follow up there, and that really helps. So, as an example, I was giving a talk at DevOps Days Houston, and then somebody comes up to me, says, "We have this amazing DevOps community. It would be great to hear you over there as well." So it kind of but by kind of some people are just shy about replying to a blog post or just randomly sending you an email because they think, well, is this guy even going to listen to what I need to say? But if you're engaged with them face to face, if you kind of if they see you, if you can actually encourage them to talk afterwards, again, being very humble and unassuming, and conveying the fact that you'd be very happy to have that conversation, then that creates a lot of connections.
Speaking of events, how would you recommend somebody, an early founder, not launched yet? I mean, somebody like you've been getting into the event circuit. Is it really just showing up? Is there more to it? What would you recommend?
So there are two things. First, send your talk, create your kind of talk and send it to as many events as possible. Now, there are great websites today like Sessionize and PaperCall and others that kind of let you discover events and send your talks there. I remember when I first got started, I was sending like to, I don't know, 30, 40 events. None of them replied back. My talk was not accepted. But then I looked back and I, first of all, worked on the presentation of the talk itself, on the text, made sure it's clear, include the video, which really kind of helped. Added additional kind of text describing kind of what the audience takes out of it, all sorts of things that were increasing its appeal. And then for the second round of submissions, I already got like 4 acceptances. So I thought, okay, what did I do better this time? I continued to improve and sent it again. So the important thing is not getting disparaged. So from just by working on the content, working on the presentation, and understanding that often you don't get accepted just because the event is overwhelmed. So you don't need to take it personally. You just need to try again and try again. I got to, from 0 acceptances when I first started to, I don't know, 30 acceptances like in the last quarter. So it's not rocket science. It's just a lot of hard work, not being disparaged by kind of being rejected. You constantly get rejected, but learning from, what works and what doesn't in terms of the messaging in your talk itself, and adding as much, videos or something tangible the person reviewing it can hold on to.
It leads me to another point, perhaps, which is, I think the idea of self-promoting is very difficult for a lot of people. I mean, I'm in marketing for years and it's difficult for me. And a lot of times people, we've spoken about, people can be shy or there's sort of an impostery feeling, etc. What are some kind of tangible things you would offer as far as like not feeling like you're being flashy? I mean, you're
Not
not.
just you. It's not just you. It's also the conference or the audience. They would not accept your self-promoting talk. At the same time, from your own kind of goals as a founder, it's nice to have a talk on a completely tangent field, but not having anything that to connect the audience to what you're doing might be a problem as well. It's not an easy problem to solve. What works for me, and I think it's in general a good idea, is not to promote your product, but to incorporate your own personal story into your talk. Why do you care about? What have you been doing around this kind of topics that you're discussing? So for me, I would never say, in the middle of a talk, well, now comes the promotional part, and here's Digma, and here's what we do, and here's why we're awesome, and we're really great, and talk to us after the presentation. But that doesn't sound good, and it will not go well with the audience, so it will backfire. However, if you say something like, here's why I care about this so much, and here's my own personal journey with this, and you know what, I started a project around this because I cared so much about it, and kind of that gives you an opening from kind of a very personal perspective to say things that may be interpreted as self-promotion, but are not perceived as such, because it's more about why you care, where is your personal angle, and that works very well for me, I think, in most of the talks that I attended.
And do you have a way, or do you even need a way to measure any of this? Like, is there something here that you feel is important to quantify? I mean, you're putting in a lot of time. Anyone doing this is putting a lot of time, effort, it's work. Do you measure, and what are you measuring if you are?
It's very hard to measure it. I think some of it is not even quantitative, it's kind of qualitative. Like, I could go to a talk and it's not like there would be a great attendance or there would be a lot of, I don't know, page views afterwards that I would be able to look at. But just the one-on-one interactions can be awesome. So I get a lot of feedback from that talk, for example. So again, going back to the point that we started with, it's kind of a two-way street. It's not just about, sending your message across, getting more views. All of these things are great. You can measure them. You'll see an uptick in views. You'll see an uptick in subscriptions. If you're trying to get people on a Slack channel, maybe you'll get some people there as well. But the other aspect of it, or the other direction, is getting feedback and hearing what people have to say, and engaging in conversations after you wrote the blog or after you give the talk at the conference. And you get amazing feedback there, because and it's the questions as well. Like, you get a whole room in front of you, and you can ask them questions, and it's completely legitimate, and it's amazing, right? And it's not even self-promotion or anything. You can ask you get a completely random set of people in a room. Well, it's randomly selected. You didn't handpick them from your circle of friends or not, and you can ask them, how many of you are, or how many of you do this, and how many of you care about that. And of course, it's not about interrogating them. You need to keep that to a certain proportion in the talk, but it still gives you such a good idea about the prevalence of self-technologies, about where things are on their worry list. About, from the talk perspective, it will make your talk much better, because it will not be you preaching to an audience. It will be kind of more kind of a conversational. But from kind of a selfish perspective, it's a great way to understand and assess what people think and how. Like, we found out that terms that we use mean nothing to developers, for example. We were using specific terms in our marketing, which we thought, yeah, of course, every developer would know what that means. And then I'm asking, well, how many people use this or that? And people were like, what is that? They were not able to answer. And as a result, we understood, well, maybe our messaging is wrong. Maybe we should say it differently. So I would, it's easy to fall into the trope of just looking at, I have a conference, I have a talk, I have a blog post. How much did it get my website traffic up? Maybe it's true. Maybe if that's what you're, completely hairpin focused on, then that makes sense. But I take the view that you need to think about it more holistically, because these things are also something that help you evolve the product and kind of do more than just kind of the marketing part or reaching a wider audience.
I guess just to end off, I thought it might be fun to share some sort of like rookie mistake or something that someone's going to walk away, start doing their first either blog post or reaching out or developing a talk, any kind of rookie mistake that you would personally warn people against or save them some time.
I think that the one thing that when I got started, I was kind of off about was what I mentioned before about understanding the rules of each kind of place that you post to. It's very easy. People are quick to love things, but they're quick to hate things. You need to be very careful about kind of what you position, how to position. Like, don't let that paralyze you, but just try to be very respectful. I see a lot of people that just get so much hate by posting in the wrong forum or saying kind of something that's completely that comes off as either arrogant or makes people a bit antagonistic about it. At the same time, the best way to get engagement is not to ask a question, but to say something that's controversial. So having said that, like, don't be, I think that the threads that I posted that got the most engagement were ones where I was kind of saying something that I knew would kind of cause that controversy, but and it's good. It's like a good way to raise people love to argue or to say other people are wrong on the internet, and that's great. So just trying to use that as much as possible. The other thing is just do it. Like, a rookie mistake would be not to do it. Like, if you're a founder and you believe in something and you did not write any blog post about it, if you did not go to the conference, never mind the conference. If you do not speak to people on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, then you're probably doing something wrong. Like, and I'm saying that from as somebody who's been constantly corrected by people and kind of that are putting me or giving me a lot of feedback that completely challenges my point of view. Like, whenever I think I'm starting to understand something, I then kind of talk to more people, and it's kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The more you think you know, the less you actually know. So it's exactly that. So the number one rookie mistake is if you're standing on the sidelines and you're not doing all of that stuff, you're not engaging your audience. I know that some of us technical founders like myself, they don't always feel comfortable in these types of forums or being very engaging communities or doing all of these things. Don't let that stop you. It just has so much value.
That's excellent. And I think I can already think of the conversations I've had with other founders about this, and this is very, very helpful and relevant. So thank you so much for talking to me and talking to us and doing this.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me.